good afternoon or evening or morning or nighttime, wherever you're listening right now. Thanks for joining us on Recruiting EQ, episode number 60. It feels like a milestone episode.
60.
I know, 60. Isn't that fun? And today is Spotlight on our very own Jenny Finch, and as well the UK markets and rec to rec, which funnily comes up a lot in conversation, even for myself who's in Canada and speaking to Americans. So great opportunity to get to know Jenny a little bit better, and also insights on rec to rec from the UK and all this good stuff. Jenny, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much indeed. Looking forward to it.
Yes. And of course, as usual,
don't ask me too many tricky questions, though, please, Mr. Rick.
There'll be no math. Mostly because I can't.
Maths, I'm good.
Oh, math?
Oh, no. Yeah, maths, I'm good.
Okay, we'll have to ask ChatGPT for the math.
She used the human calculator. Let's ask for as many maths questions as we can. I would say that our cups of tea, because we're all British around. Well, we're not all British, but the cups of tea are us, right? And we also
have a travel mug of coffee to be Canadian. A giant mug. Sorry.
You have to speak about the weather for at least 30 seconds, Jenny, because that's what all British do.
No, it's beautiful here, actually. I'm in sunny Brighton and the sun is shining. Great weekend, great bank holiday weekend as well. We've been really fortunate with the weather recently, so it's quite a nice topic. It's been sunny and hot, and in some places hotter than Europe as well. So, yeah, it's all good.
Lovely. That goes against the stereotype that England is foggy and rainy.
No. Well, it can be. But it definitely can be rainy, but it's not at the moment. I think we're in a really nice sunny spell.
You're in the one day of the year where it's not, right?
Yes. No, that's not true.
I say that because I'm British too, but yes, but
no, yeah. I know quite a few people that have been swimming in the sea last week, and
wow.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, we're the ones in Toronto anyway who've been getting nonstop rain and cool and whatever until like today. It's gorgeous today, but it's been a long winter. It's been a real winter, and it's been a rainy spring. So bring on the sun. Bring on the sun.
We'll try and send it to you then.
Oh, thank you. Send it over from sunny England, from sunny Brighton.
Absolutely.
It's funny actually because just a sort of sidebar here for a second. So not that it probably matters a lot, but I think when I speak to, it's funny, like being let's call it a Brit abroad, whenever I speak to anybody that's not British or hasn't been to England, a lot of the places that people think about and reference to with England is obviously London. I suppose it's the same about, similar about any other country. You think of Australia, you think of maybe Sydney and whatnot, but it's like, I just thought it was interesting to know this. So Brighton is on the south coast of England, isn't it? So it's opposite France. Actually on the water. When you talk about the sea, what you mean is the ocean. And if I'm going to translate here, just right, because people are like, what are you talking about? The sea is like the ocean.
Really?
Swim in the ocean. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Brighton has a pebble beach though, doesn't it? Brighton is quite, well, not unique, but it has a pebble beach. There are places along the south coast that actually have a sandy beach, but Brighton has a pebble beach. So you always need to, well, I would always use some sea shoes on the beach if you're going to go and swim in, for sure.
A point of difference with England, you don't get sand really very often on the beach whatsoever.
No.
It's always pebbles, which people are surprised by. It's like, why would you go and lay on that? Yeah, good point.
You just do. You just do. Yeah.
You just.
Well, you're from Brighton, Julie, aren't you? So
I am. But it's and it's also for anyone that cares. It's an hour south of London. So most people in the world, if they've ever been to England, have also been to Brighton, funny enough. It's quite an infamous place.
Well, it's an hour from London. It's also got Gatwick Airport, which is half an hour up the road. So often, it's got a major UK airport there as well. So,
A lot of music talk about Brighton too. A lot of musicians either from there or there's music all the time. It comes up a lot in my life. That's why I know Brighton exists. Really, was from music industry people or bands or artists
and films. Quadrophenia was filmed in Brighton, and actually another one which I forget now, but and also a few sort of famous DJs, a few famous musicians. Like I say, I think Paul McCartney has a place still in Brighton. I think. At one point, didn't he, Jen? And a few, Adele, I think, lived in.
Adele, Fat Boy Slim, right? Fat Boy Slim, who I adore.
Very cosmopolitan. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, some
So
trivia.
it's all come to Brighton, basically. That's what we're saying,
Brighton.
isn't it?
It's just like Quadrophenia. It's just mods and rockers squaring off everywhere.
Absolutely. Or charging along the seafront on their mopeds.
On their mopeds, yes. Exactly, with pointy shoes and long hair.
Yeah.
I'm only basing it on the movie. I've never been to Brighton, but there you go. At least I've seen the movie. Well, Jenny, thank you for being our featured guest today. We've hit on a lot of topics, but and a lot of our audience, I would say, typically has been in Canada and the US. But today we've invited a good number of Brits for today as well. But it does come up a lot. I mean, like the UK seems to be the centrifuge of all things recruitments to an extent, not all things, but you know what I mean. It seems to be certainly in rec to rec, and I think it's high time that we perhaps get to hear a little bit about your story, your journey of getting into recruitment and getting into rec to rec and all that jazz.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. So a potted history. I went the traditional route of being in sales, being a sales rep for a number of different companies, for a couple of companies, selling stationery and selling. My first job in sales actually was a commission only door knocking in London, selling telephone systems and copiers, which was really, I mean, it gave me a really good grounding of what sales would be. And then I moved into a paid position in repping. And then what I realized is that I loved selling, but I got lonely being in a car on the road, essentially, and I needed a team. I wanted a team around me. So I thought about different roles that would allow me to still be able to go and see customers, still work in a team, still sell, and naturally recruitment kind of ticked those boxes. So I went into my first recruitment job in January 1990 in sunny Croydon, which is South London, and worked for the same company essentially for about 8 years. Had a number of different roles with that particular company, and they ended up being bought out by Kelly Services. So I was a perm consultant, a temp consultant, a trainer, a branch manager, opened up one of their sites up in their new office up in Cambridge. I lived up in Cambridge for a little while, and met some really good friends. Actually, in terms of my circle of friends, are still in contact with a lot of the people that I worked with when I was at Kelly, and then decided that I would go traveling for a year. So had been a branch manager, and it was a big decision actually, because in the world of recruiting, getting to be a branch manager, company car, mobile phone, all the the nice stuff. But went traveling for a year, which was amazing. If anyone ever speaks to me about thinking about doing it, I always say absolutely. You never regret it, and it was fantastic. And then when I came back, someone that I used to work with at Kelly actually had set up a rec to rec business, and I joined them as a rec to rec person. And one of my placements back then actually is still at the same company that I placed them in, and now they're a director of that company. They joined as a trainee and are still there. So and a couple of other people that I know that I placed actually are still there as well. So yeah, I'm very proud of that actually. So, and then decided, had a conversation with someone that I used to work with, and joined a new location of a company where I stayed for about 16 years, set up a number of divisions there, more on the professional services side. I'm a bit of a stayer, I think it's fair to say, in recruitment. Yeah, I am. And I think that, if you are presented with opportunities within the business that you're in terms of growth, progression, and you can almost scratch that itch of where you are and you don't need to move elsewhere, then I've been fortunate to be able to do that. So stayed, I think, At Search, it was 16 years, almost 16 years. And Julie and I's paths have crossed, haven't they, over those years in terms of recruitment. And back in, I think it was 1991, was it, where you were going off travelling, and I relocated from Croydon down to Brighton and had a number of months opposite Julie, and then she went off travelling. And then when she came back, did you return to Kelly at that point? I think we worked again there, and then a few other businesses as well. So and then stopped at Search and set up with Julie Raymond George, which doesn't feel like almost, well, it's 8.5 years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, goodness me, that is crazy. Absolutely crazy. So that is a very potted history of getting into rec to rec. But I've been in recruitment now for 35 years, which is crazy
and awesome. And I have so many questions, and I'm sure so does Julie. Just to backtrack for a second, so like marquee things that happened in 1991: grunge breaks around the world, Julie and Benny meet. There you go. The two big things.
But I think recruitment's obviously changed quite considerably, because we would hand deliver CVs, we'd run up the road, it was fastest runner first to get a CV on someone's desk. That's how you were, rather than obviously on email. We used to have cards client cards and candidate cards, and you'd physically go through them. So anyone that's been in recruitment for, I don't know, maybe 25, 28 years plus would have worked in that system. And we only got the internet in as I was leaving to go traveling, because, we only got the internet in about that sort of time. So, yeah, really, really crazy when you think back about sort of like technology and how it is now and what the job is now. The job is quite different to what it was then. There's lots of similarities, but there are some differences as well.
So you went traveling and came back, and it was the internet. Like that's kind of a big change. Like I go for a year, but not just any year. The year that we go online too, and it's all different.
Well, the year that there was a CRM introduced, the year that the CRM was introduced, the year that it was. And when I was traveling, you used to go to like internet cafes to actually log on and talk to people, and it was crazy, really. That's how you communicated via your Hotmail account.
Yeah, for sure. Up till recently, I still had my Hotmail. Did you guys still have like an old Hotmail address that like?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Is it just your name, or is it something silly?
Yes,
like we all did.
Yeah,
it's,
it's crazy. Yeah, it's I think it might have now actually. I haven't used it for years, but I need to find it. I need to find it and see if it's still there.
That's awesome. I mean, so the job changes drastically. Incidentally, how did you feel about going from sales? There's a couple of things there, but you were going from sales where you were on the road, and from door knocking to being on the road to everything, and then going to recruitment. How did you feel about being in staffing then? Did you find it easier? Did you find it less lonely like you wanted to? Like, how did you?
It was a completely different. I loved it, and I knew from the outset that was where my home was going to be in recruitment. For sure. I had made so what I should have done in hindsight is I'd worked for a stationery company for a couple of years, and had built a really good client base, really enjoyed it, selling stationery, actually had regular customers, and it was really, really good. I then decided to join a business that was at that time, as a rep, was the one to join. And I had a couple of interviews, and I actually got turned down for them because they felt that their style of selling wouldn't have suited my style of selling, because mine was all about relationships, about consistency. It wasn't the go in, go out and get it signed as quickly as you possibly could. And they were mindful of that. at the time thought that they were wrong, because I thought, actually, I can do it. And,
obviously.
Yeah. So I spoke to the recruitment agency that had put me forward and said, look, are you okay if I ring them up and actually have a conversation? Because I think, obviously, I've not explained enough in the interview process. And so got myself in front of them again. They did offer me the job, but they were absolutely right in the first instance to think it wasn't right for me, because it wasn't. And I do, anyone that knows me, or as a, candidate or client, I'll often cite that, because sometimes when people get turned down for opportunities, it's not about them, it's not about that person, but sometimes it's not that you're not good enough, but actually how somebody operates and what you're meant to be doing. And it's not just about getting the job, it's about ensuring that actually, the content of what you're doing on a daily basis fits your preferences as much as it can. And the way that role worked, it didn't fit my preferences, and I just didn't like it. And I went from there into recruitment. I'm glad I did it, because I've got obviously evidence of actually what doesn't work for me as well. But I was kind of, I was pretty upset that I hadn't got offered it. And, and then they did offer it, but hats off to them that they were right, that they should have said no. And they did say no, but I convinced them that,
you raise a good point though. But you raise a good point though too. And some people will say this even now. They'll be like, you know what, sales is sales is sales. And while I agree to an extent, I also wonder, like, I feel that's a bit of a flag comes up for me, because it's like, it also isn't though, right? Like, it really depends what the context and the expectation is. Because if you don't like it, you're not going to do it. Like, it's sales. Where are you going to get the energy and the motivation to put yourself out there every single day if you're not enjoying it? You're just going to be like, ugh, I hate this. And it's, how are you supposed to summon the energy?
What it allowed me to do is to really, I suppose, get visibility of different sales processes.
Right.
And my style and how I operated, and my preferred way of operating, was in relationship building. It wasn't about being this sort of like hard person to try and close on, and it was quite formulaic. The style that they used was, there was a structure, there was a funnel, and you followed this process. And for me, that didn't work. And I, was happy to go. The idea is, with a new customer, you had to sign them up there and then. You didn't go back. You didn't have time to go back to sign them up. With an existing customer, you did a 2-stage visit. And again, you had to sign them up in that second stage, because you didn't have time to go back. So it was great training. Absolutely. Really, really good training. But what I recognized is, with a new customer, you might have a great relationship, but you're not going to see them again for another year. So that didn't really fit who I was then or now.
And when you went into staffing then, what was the first vertical you were working?
Office services, commercial. Yeah.
As a sales rep, or were you 360 or?
So it was 360. So probably one of the key differences is that at that time, you didn't really have, well, there were probably some IT businesses that had resources and delivery folks, but generally speaking, most recruitment people were in a 360 role. You might have somebody on sort of like the temporary side of things that maybe did a little bit more admin, but generally speaking, it's a 360 recruiter.
And I just quantify or clarify that, and what you mean by that is that you would go and get your own business and fill it.
Yes.
Which is the British style, still is really.
That's one of the major differences, right?
Yeah, major difference between America and actually lots of other places, but British standards, that is generally who you are when you're in recruitment.
Yeah. And absolutely. And, again, at that time, we didn't have at that time, we didn't have a computer. We had files of people, and you'd have their notes on, because you'd see them as well. They'd come in, and you'd actually interview the person, and then you'd go on visits and meet with your clients. And you kept these files, on your desk or in your drawers.
And I have to add that you also took a Polaroid picture of them, which is probably completely like not PC and something that we would do these days. But
Yeah.
Polaroid, that must have cost a fortune. They're really expensive, those Polaroid cameras.
But
I was gonna say Polaroids aren't cheap.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
Massive.
No, and you'd write their name on it as well, and then you'd staple it to the file. But I think I learned very quickly that so I was in quite a small team in my very first office, and I was working with one particular person who was very competitive, and that was obviously helpful, but was able to lock their desk drawers because I was happy to stay later, but they locked their desk drawers so that, you know, getting visibility of what jobs.
You used to go through someone else's drawers, Jennifer Finch.
I didn't do that. No, they absolutely. But that's the point. You know, I didn't do that. But the kind of concept and the mindset was I need to lock my drawers. You know, but it's changed, and it did change. You know, over those years, and definitely it's quite. You know, it's much more collaborative now, I would say, and people in recruitment actually are more collaborative. But at that point, well, also because you've got visibility of information, you've got it on your CRM, you can find information, can't you? So, but then it was a physical piece of paper or a job order that you'd written down, and yeah, it was.
But I still think, though, to that point, though, I think sort of, I mean, not. I think still people do worry about that in terms of ownership. And I think certain organizations do still have a bit of a reputation around, like, you know, like how am I going to sort of steal, or is that, I think that sort of cultural piece is not unexpected in all places still today.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, it's not your preferred way of working, is it? It's but it did. Because I was happy to share, you know, I was super happy to share, and but the individual that I was working with was less happy to share.
Would it be fair to say, because, you know, a lot of the people I speak to in the US, particularly, not a lot, but I'd say half of them are adamant that the 180 model is the only model that makes sense. It's the only thing that's scalable, and that's what makes it 360 doesn't work. And then most of the Brits I speak to are like, the 180 model doesn't work. It's 360 or nothing. You know what I mean? So it is a debate that comes up, and I'm neutral. I'm like Switzerland in this whole thing. Like, I'm like, look, it really depends on the situation. I was trained watching UK videos at my Toronto agency of how to be a 360 that, you know, gets candidates first and then markets them out to clients and gets them as clients and then builds a relationship with the client. But the candidate is a bit more transactional and you're candidate driven. Is it fair to say then that the UK, like, that's the UK model? I would assume often.
I think it's the so there are definitely businesses that have a delivery model. So the 180 on the candidate side,
right,
and the 180 on the sales side. And there's been periods over the years where there's been, you know, more of an influx on moving away, you know, trying the non-360 role. I think it depends, you know, vastly on the individual that you've got, like what their skill set is, and do they want to, you know, building the relationship with the customer, understanding what their needs are, and then actually going to find that individual. Rather than it being lost in translation in some sectors. I think that's one of the things that can happen.
Sure.
But there are definitely markets, I would say, that historically would have worked to delivery, like an IT specialism. They were probably one of the sort of like early, and don't quote me on this because I haven't got the facts and figures, but my perception was that IT was a market that actually lended itself quite well to having a 180 model or even a 270. I mean, there's a 180, there's a 270 and a 360. But in terms of people's enjoyment, you know, if you can, I think the win is if you are a recruitment business and you have somebody that particularly excels in a particular element of the job and they want to do more of that, and you can facilitate that in your business, then you should. Because, you know, if someone's great with candidates and can find those little nuggets and the unicorns that are out there and do that piece and really engage, and they've got a really strong network, then to ask them then to be client facing, if they don't want to do that, is, you know, perhaps counterproductive, because they're going to be more productive on the delivery front. And then you've also got people that want to sell, and, you know, and really want to sell and generate orders. But sometimes their frustration is the orders aren't being filled by the delivery, if it was a 180 model, and that can, you know, that can happen. But I think there's often been debate over, you know, are you a customer facing person that loves to sell? But in my mind, as a candidate delivery person on the 180 side, those people are also selling, you know, finding really, you know, I don't think that's not a sales job, but I think the perception in the market is, I don't want to pick the phone up and cold call, but actually what you're doing, your audience is your candidates that you're cold calling to. So it's interesting, but I would say the majority of businesses, I'd say the majority, that's probably too many, but the 360 model is a more regular model in the UK for sure. Yeah. And I mean, I think we've all seen that, haven't we, when we work with organizations that are either, you know, opening up in a different territory, different, you know, whether it's North America, you know, US, Canada, and they're British firms, the head office is in the UK, then their preferred hiring model is a 360. Whereas, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are less firms that have that 360 model in North America.
Well, so yeah, I'll add into it, because I mean, I've had this conversation like 472,000 times with both British folks and North American people, and you know, I don't know that there's a perfect answer to this.
No.
But I do think that clearly the benefit of having a 360, I think, of two things, is a communication, where when you've got one person involved in the end-to-end transaction, it's got to be better, because you just have, there's no error for communication, there's no finger pointing if there is error in communication, and it just is solid all the way through. So that has to.
Well, there's no leakage, is there? There's no leakage in terms of information that is translated.
And it's all down to you, right? So I was speaking to a candidate, actually, funnily enough, who's going for an interview, who currently is a 180 sales, actually, but she's going for an interview for a 360 role. And I think that there's distinct benefits to the customer there, because, you know, at presentation with a client, you can easily sell against the 180 model, because it's like, I am here selling to you, Mr. Client. Yes, I am. And I'm the person that's putting my neck on the block. Yeah. I'm going to fill this role for you. It's all me. There's nothing that's going to be lost in translation here. There's no waiting for the delivery team to do whatever. And maybe it isn't a big wait, but it's just because there are too many people or more people involved, there's got to be some sort of, you know, protraction in that whole process. And I think the other thing too is cost. So cost, when you've got one person doing this, is obviously one person doing this, if they're good at both things. If you've got two people doing it, you've got two people's costs. Now, I know that you can sell against that, because you can totally say, well, if someone's just focusing, then they should be able to do more of this and more of that, so you should get double the output. I get that, but you still have got two lots of cost, which from a cash flow perspective is 50% more. With not necessarily 50% increase, I would say, or 100% increase. So I think that is, I think, two big differentiators, and I'm quite passionate about this. Like I said, I've had quite a lot of conversation about this in the past, and some situations have not landed me in a very good spot, to be honest. I wish I had a more articulate communication in one situation that I can remember, but I think that the ideal situation is actually to accommodate both the way you can.
Absolutely.
Because, to your point, and I think people lean, even if you're a 360, you lean to one or the other. I mean, you've always lent more towards the candidate side, and I've always lent more towards the client side. But it doesn't mean you can't do the other part.
Yeah.
So it depends on the market, and also the sector, I think, too, as to what fits best.
Yeah. And like you say, I think if a business is able to facilitate both, and then they're going to get the best out of everybody, they're going to be more productive, aren't they, and happier. If you're doing an element of your role that you really don't prioritize, but it's a necessary part of the funnel, as in you need to get some new business, but that's not your preferred way, then that's going to be the element of the role that actually isn't going to get done as much. And actually it's important. So yeah.
Totally. I also think in the US too, that there tends to be a leaning more toward contract and high volume contract. And I think that's where they like that perm is a bit of an add-on for any kind of medium-sized business, except for search, right? Like if it's search, then it's, then it's search, right? But for the 180 model, I think that they feel like contract is the base, the building block of your recruiting firm. And sure, if you do perm, great, but they don't put a lot of attention on it, right? So it's like your salesperson is going out to get clients that are going to give you like 20, 30 recs. Obviously, you can't fill all of them, so you need a team and they want them out there selling, right? So that, but to your point, Julie, it seems, and we've seen this happen since COVID, right? That it's like something changes with one of those big clients. Well, now you got to let go of a whole bunch of recruiters because, again, the cost is much higher. So the cash flow of runners out and lots of workforce to try to do it, unless you're Randstad or, you know what I mean, one of the biggies, right? Like if you're, it's a lot of pressure to juggle that.
I think one of the other things, obviously you use the term recruiters, and that's and you mean the 180 candidates, don't you? Whereas for me, a recruiter is a recruiter, which is a 360 recruiter. So the terminology is somewhat different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good point. Like a recruitment consultant, in our job as a rec to rec, it makes it difficult to know what people do. Because if someone's in New York and they're called a recruitment consultant, but they work for a local firm, they're probably a 180. Maybe not, but they're probably a 180. But if they work for an English firm in New York, they're probably a 360 and they have the same title. So it makes it hard to know because the terms are vastly different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you get into rec to rec then, Jenny? You touched on it briefly, and how have you felt about the move from going to doing professional services and other kinds of direct verticals to essentially being peer focused, right, and recruiting within your own space of recruiters?
Well, I think because I had visibility for a year before I went into the professional services, and I knew that I really enjoyed it, and I went into rec to rec after, I suppose, 8 or 9 years in recruitment. So I was a branch manager, which I think was, for me, important because I'd hired staff and trained staff, and so I kind of knew as a manager what to look for, and obviously then went into professional services, and that covered legal, insurance, financial services, accountancy, technical, quite a range in terms of those vertical teams and those markets. Going into rec to rec was almost like it was quite a natural choice. Having worked in recruitment for such a long time and having, at different levels, hired different people. So whether they're experienced people, whether they're managers, whether or not they are, associate directors, or even trainees, understanding and interviewing was and trying to get it right as well, because you're hiring for your own team, aren't you? Ensuring yeah. So I mean, applying that same principle in terms of interviewing people, thinking not necessarily would I hire them because every business is different and what's right in one business isn't necessarily, but have they got the right motivators? Have they got the right drivers? Are they coachable? Are they, teachable? And, do their numbers stack up? So going into rec to rec actually was quite a natural area. And when I left my previous firm, one of the things that I obviously had a restricted covenant, couldn't operate in the markets that I'd worked in before. And I'd been with the business for such a long, I wasn't going to entertain breaking that at all.
Right.
But I did know that the firm that I'd previously worked for obviously was hiring. So in terms of when we first started, Julie and I, they were our first client. And that was fantastic, because understanding how the business worked, understanding the different teams, the different individuals in the business. So yeah, that was a a very strong benefit. And having worked in Brighton and, you know, this, and really in Sussex, the surrounding area, understanding who was out there, looking at the different firms in terms of, you know, they're a good firm, maybe, you know, identifying, knowing your market. I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's knowing your market, knowing who you want to have clients, who you want your clients to be, and knowing where, you know, in our world, we don't take from, you know, if you've got a client, then they're a client. And if they're not a client, then they potentially are somebody that we can approach individuals in. And the two don't ever cross. So it just made sense to do that because I knew the market as well. So, yeah.
Julie, did you also feel like it was a natural progression from creative to going into rec to rec? Or?
Well, I think the anomaly there was creative. I actually didn't know anything about creative and still don't. So, so it was, I don't know if that's natural or not, but maybe there's a different commonality there for my progression. But I was just interested to know from you, Jen, like, because obviously now being in Canada and working the North American market, it's people don't necessarily know what a rec to rec is or even does, and it's surprising to them when you say and explain like this is what we do. And it's a bit, I think, unusual for some folks. It's like, what do you mean? You provide, I literally did, I made a cold call once to a client, I remember it distinctly when we started the business. And she was like astonished, like,
Really?
Is that what this was in Canada. Yeah. She was like, really? That's what you guys do? Okay, how bizarre. And I think still now when we talk to candidates, they're like, so what is it that you actually do? And it's like, well, this is what we do. But in England, it's commonplace.
Yeah.
It is. So, and I also, not only is the rec to rec market commonplace, I don't know what percentage of the recruitment market in totality it actually is, but the business itself, and I'm sure that you've probably got some stats, Rick, you do like a little bit of a stat, don't you? But
I do.
In terms of the actual worth of the recruitment industry in England is massive, massive, massive. I mean, billions, multi-billions. And I'm sure the rec to rec market is very high as well. So it's just very normal. Well, maybe we should say we're not normal, but it's not an unusual thing to be in a recruitment business which actually supplies recruiters to other staffing or recruitment firms. Whereas here it is, but it's almost like a subset of the bigger beast, which is just the recruitment and staffing industry, which is massive. And so
when I went into it initially back in 1999, I think it was. I think in the UK at that point, and don't quote me, but I think there were kind of 5 rec to rec firms in the UK. Obviously that changed quite quickly, but that was the time where people hadn't really heard about it. But that's now 26 years ago, you know, in terms of that's a long time ago. And you know, unless you're coming in at an entry point, I would say that 95% of people in recruitment would have heard of a rec to rec or been approached by a rec to rec. Yeah, absolutely. Not, you know, so I think it's quite different. I mean, people know of rec to recs, they understand what they do. Obviously, you know, different rec to recs do different things, and but in the UK, definitely. I don't think I've ever had, I don't think I've had a conversation with, well, what do you do? I think sometimes candidates will ask, actually, why, you know, when you approach them, why has that client chosen to go through a rec to rec rather than hiring themselves? That's a question that, you know, candidates that understand what a rec to rec does, and they want to understand why that client hasn't done it directly. And I get that. But yeah, it's probably quite different. Your starting point is almost like, you know, it's the stage before, isn't it? Rather than it's like, who are you? What do you do? How can you help? Rather than for us, it's you're a rec to rec. That's what you do. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny actually, because we're working, so in North America, we're working with some British firms, as you would expect. So I think that the commonality there is like attract like, right? So so we often do end up working with British businesses. And when we talk about the competitors and who else are they using or what experience that they have, it's like, oh yeah, we're working with this other rec to rec. Right. And where are they? In England. So that all like
Almost
the
always.
market
Yeah.
to Rex is massive from the UK perspective, and a lot of them work the other markets, so the other international markets from England still. So
Yeah.
that is also very common. Anyway, I don't want to take over.
No. It's totally true. And you know what, Jenny? People will literally ask me, or you know what I mean, in life, or clients even, like, oh, okay, so HR. So you guys are HR. I'd be like, well, no, not really HR. And like, oh, but you hire like TA people, and I'm like, well, not really. I mean, we could, but it's not specifically that. It's like, oh, so how do you hire like entry level recruiters only at agencies? And I'm like, why did you make that leap, man? There's a lot of people who work in agencies. Like, why do you think it's only entry level recruiters? It could be salespeople too. It's just like, oh, sales recruiters. Like it's a revelation, you know. It's a long process, but I was that guy, right? When Luke Riedman first spoke to me about Rec to Rec, I had no clue that it was a thing at all. So I was like, what?
It's a thing, Rick. It's a thing.
It is. Luckily for us all.
It's a big thing.
Yeah.
Speaking of stats, Julie, as you mentioned, I just pulled a couple of quick ones. The UK is the sort of annual revenue from staffing in the UK is about 40 billion pounds. Third largest in the world. So it's US, Japan, and then UK. Funnily enough, Japan is the second biggest market. And globally, we're talking for recruiting. These stats go back to 2022 to 25. I don't know why, but in 2022, the global staffing industry had reached 650 billion US dollars globally. Most of that is the US, Japan, and the UK, more than half. So that's crazy. Temporary staffing was 500 billion out of 650. So the vast majority.
Wow.
Yeah. And then by 2025, so here you go, there's an update, 673 billion total.
Wow.
Total. But yeah, the vast majority being contract staffing, and yeah. And you know, the funny thing is they say the US, but those are like placements and clients and whatever made in the US. It'd be funny to see how many of those are made by like UK firms, but in the US.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But when you think of the size of the US, and I haven't got a demographic comparison here, I'm sure you can pull those stats if you want to too, Rick. But
sure.
When you think of the geography and the demographics of the US compared to England, it's like, okay, we've got some bossy pants going on in England that do like a bit of recruitment.
Yeah, well, 100%. And who are responsible for a good chunk of that recruitment in the US also. Yep. So like, and in other countries, not just the US, of course, but like globally.
Yeah, so I was telling you, wasn't I, that I saw this this particular advert of someone just happening to make a mention about the Australian market, about that they hadn't actually ever spoken to anybody in recruitment that wasn't British.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, there's like a mass. Yeah, there's a mass. I mean, I haven't done this survey myself, but we know of one actually that's recently gone to Australia who is not British. Because she's Emma from our team and is Canadian. But anyway, it doesn't matter where someone's from. But the point is that the Brits are very prevalent in this sector.
But didn't the sector start? Rick, can you come up with a year when sort of like recruitment started in the UK? Because I think it was like 1940 something?
Like staffing agencies.
Yeah, recruitment agent. Pop in recruitment agencies.
The concept of staffing agencies, according to Google's AI, the concept of staffing agencies in the UK has roots as early as 1650.
Okay. Okay.
And then the first known labor exchange in England was established by Alsager Hay Hill in 1871.
Okay.
Wow. So that's a more proper, agency. 1871, but that it was around as early as 1650.
Wow.
And there's a couple of comments I'll address from the same gentleman here who said, first off, I can relate going from paper to ATS in reference to what you were saying before, Jenny, but also, Are we talking about requisition to recruitment? And I don't really know what that means, but that's the thing, right? So rec to rec is not a very well-known phrase, but really we're talking about ourselves being a recruiting agency who recruits people who are in staffing and recruiting. So that's what we're really talking about, right? And we do multiple things. So we would recruit for them. There's an advisory capacity if someone's, let's say, starting up a new office in a new territory. There's partners that we work with for training if you need people to be trained or upskilled. So there's a lot of different things that we make podcasts like this one, for example, nowadays. But yeah, but it's a support consultancy to the staffing recruiting.
Yeah, I
world.
think it's I mean, yeah, we use the term rec to rec, don't we? But actually it's recruitment to recruitment is what
Yeah.
it stands, you know, that's basically what it stands for. Recruiting recruiters in recruitment businesses.
Yeah. But see, that confuses people because a lot of people walking around think of recruiters as being TA. And in Canada, they still use the term headhunters pretty loosely, like for headhunting agencies, which I don't think is actually PC any longer. I don't think you're supposed to say that, but I think that's what clues people in. But it's funny because Canada is supposed to have a $10-12 billion staffing market, and yet a lot of people don't really think of recruiting agencies when you say recruitment to recruitment or placing recruiters. The first thing that comes out of people's mouths inevitably is HR to me all the time. Here.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's an interesting stigma. Who knows?
Absolutely.
But so how are you feeling, Jenny, about, you've been in rec to rec for this amount of time, since having a restrictive covenant and going into rec to rec and it being a natural progression, even, aside from Raymond George, you've done some rec to rec too, but, you've been in it for some time. How have you felt that it's changed, evolved? You know what I mean? There's been a lot of ups and downs, I'm sure, like obviously globally, but how are you feeling about that evolution over the past few years, let's say?
So in terms of rec to rec specifically, or just
Yeah.
recruiting?
Either
I
or,
think
really.
that, and I'm going to be careful with my words here, but Julie and I were talking yesterday, and sometimes the recruitment industry as a whole doesn't always have, for some reason, almost like the best reputation, does it? There's other sectors that are out
The
there.
heck you say?
And we feel, both Julie and I, and I'm sure you would, Rick, as well, we feel quite strongly that actually, it's a profession. You can change someone's life, in terms of the opportunities. You can help grow a business, regardless of whether you're placing recruiters or you're placing, people in tech, people in emerging technologies as well, that really can make a difference to an organization and their growth. So in the last couple of years, I think there has been a little bit more of some, recruitment bashing that's out there. But I also think that, I think how you operate as a recruiter, regardless of what sector you work in, is, your own moral compass. Do you get commitment from a candidate before you send their CV? Absolutely. That's what you should do. And it's frustrating when you speak to candidates or you speak to clients where that hasn't happened. And that, in my world, is a non-negotiable. You should always do that. I think that there are it's funny because, I love recruitment. I always have. And, it's something that I've done for such a long time. So, I am totally invested in it. And I think people go into recruitment and they either do, I was always told this, you're either going to stay for 6 months to a year and then you never do it again. Or you kind of, after the year, you kind of get it and you want to stay in that. And that's obviously what my, journey was. And I think, Julie, your journey too. And Rick, yours as well, isn't it? Once you get into recruitment. So, in terms of what the market is at the moment, I think the market is different dependent on the sector and the countries that you operate in. And within each sector, there are different pluses and there's different challenges. And people that are good at recruitment are consistently doing the right things, rather than trying to cut corners and trying to get, I don't think, if you want to get a quick win, you might get a quick win on one occasion, but actually it's only going to be one quick win. And you need to build the relationships with the customers, build the relationships with your candidates, be honest, be able to say what the market's like, and and have the strength that if one of your candidates is interviewing at a company that you would have put them forward to if you'd spoken to them first, make sure that you share that with them. They don't become a bad company just because you haven't put them forward. And you kind of hear that a little bit. So yeah, it's I think it depends who's doing it, who's doing it. And as a collective sector, are we always doing the right things for both clients, both your candidate and the businesses? And if you can say yes, you're always doing the right things, then that's fantastic.
Well, yeah, and Jenny, I was thinking that this is both of you guys will find this next question predictable because you know me very well. But I was thinking about what you were saying before about doing things manually, recruitment being sales to an extent, really, or should be looked at that way, where you are picking up the phone and you aren't shy to do so and just hiding behind an email with a job spec, and really getting to know people and all that stuff, and leaving on to travel and coming back, and here's ATSs and CRMs and the internet and what have you. Now it's like we're going to maybe the next biggest change in tools with automation and AI tools and sequencing and just taking over. But the AI now will be taking over a lot of the things that beforehand, like when we implemented CRMs and used the internet and email, people had to learn to integrate that into recruitment, and now it's going away again in a way because it can be offloaded to a large extent if it's done properly to automation. Do you think that there's room or benefit in revisiting some of the old focuses that existed before email and CRMs, whatever, were a focus?
I think that it's in any sort of move in technology, I think it's about ensuring that a process is fit for purpose. And AI and technology can do elements, absolutely, but it will never, well, I say never, I can't imagine it, or I would never use it for an intake call, for a job intake call. I would never use it to interview a candidate, because the human part of recruitment, cultural fit, skills fit, being able to describe an organization to a candidate, maybe AI can do that, but I enjoy that part of the role, and I think most recruiters enjoy that connection and getting to know somebody. I think AI will, like a CRM, it will play a part, and you can set up sequences, and perhaps in some more volume recruitment where there's, I don't know, a high level of jobs to get through, that it's going to be part of that volume screening, absolutely. But in our world, I can't ever imagine it playing that bigger part. It maybe in the back office, but not in the connection with a customer or with a candidate.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you mentioned before too about the relationship element, right? I think there's this danger right now where people think they have a relationship with their AI because they're talking to it and it sounds convincing, but it's not actually a relationship, right? Like it's like you're saying, it's one sided. I mean, the AI isn't feeling feelings and being like, "Oh, you're my friend." You know what I mean? It may say stuff like that, but it is just programmed, right? So it's like it's not really. There's no real relationship to speak of at the end of the day when AI is involved, and it's like.
Yeah, we're in the human business, aren't we? We're in the people business, and I think being in the people business, the more connection that you can have with another human has got to be good, particularly in recruitment, to understand the needs of a candidate. What is it that they're looking for? Why do they want to move? What's important to them in their next role? Yes, you could probably get a telephone script going through that, but you're not hearing it. You're not being able to prompt the conversation.
And I think that's the point, actually, Jenny. It's like that you can ask a bunch of questions and get a bunch of answers, but it's almost what the unsaid is that helps you steer what you do next. And I think that's, oops.
Oh, it's Canada's emergency alert
Oh,
system.
there's an emergency alert there. Sorry, I put myself on mute.
Of
But
course, they chose to do it between noon and 1. Thanks, Canada.
yes, I did get a warning about that actually. But no, but I think that's. I mean, maybe that will be technology that is developed at some point. But I think it's a lot of reading between the lines, intonation. That is the skill in this job. Because if there was no skill in this, then we would all be replaced by some sort of everything we do would be replaced by some sort of artificial intelligence of some sort. Because why wouldn't it? Because it costs a whole lot less and it's a lot faster.
I mean, one of the things that I think is, a really positive is like these AI note takers in
absolutely,
and things, and that absolutely saves a lot of time, without a shadow of a doubt. But I am still the person holding that conversation, and it is taking notes from me and the person, whether it's a candidate or a client. So that is a massive positive, and you can absolutely see how that saves time. You're not recreating the reel, you're not writing it down, you're not not even typing it as you talk. You can have full concentration on the person that you're talking to and engage with that individual. You can take it, I've taken it on meetings before where I've had my laptop logged in and it's taking notes of the meeting, and that's fantastic. So for me, that's a really big plus, but it would never take away from the conversation and the human element.
It's I mean, obviously I'm aligned with both of you very much, and this is why I love working at Raymond George, because it is, I feel that I belong here. But I you speak to people in rec to rec, hiring managers even, and maybe they just get jaded over time, but to an extent they're like, they kind of just want they want resilience and they want volume out of their human beings, right? They don't really want them to think too much, and sometimes, and I feel like there's been a loss a little bit of that human individualistic character of, does this person have good instincts? What are the things that are unsaid? What vibe did you get from them? Can you tell if someone's lying to you about something and you probe a little bit, or if they're, you know what I mean? Like if they are just saying what you want to hear. That's a big one. How the hell is AI supposed to know if someone's just saying what you want to hear? And then you can tell and be like, you could also do this. You could suggest something else. Be creative with people, right? I feel like that side of the business isn't really in a lot of agencies not really encouraged or valued as much as one would hope.
I think it depends on the sector that you work in. Some of the higher volume sectors, there's process and there's GDPR here. There's data. There's certain things that you've got to get people checked if it's high volume, whether it's industrial, hospitality. I would say that in most specialist sectors, I would think that, particularly in the UK, I've never experienced that type of conversation. I've experienced more that people want people to use their initiative, that they want them to be commercial, that they want them to be coachable. Yes, there is a process, but it's, particularly as an experienced recruiter, you want to allow that person to play to their strengths. And so being too restrictive and boxing, no, you can't say that. I remember we worked with somebody, Julie, didn't we, sort of like quite early on at Raymond George, and when they'd come from quite a big corporate background where everything had to be signed off by marketing, anything that they wrote on LinkedIn, they couldn't put a post together, it had to be externally signed off, and they were like, who wants to check this? It's like, no, it's fine, if you think it's okay, then that's absolutely fine, you post it. So there's probably different elements of what someone, there's negotiables, aren't there? There's non-negotiables. Actually, that's the legal requirement that we have to ask that we need to do that. But certainly in the more boutique specialist firms, I think people hire people for their initiative and ideas. Most often, I don't think I've ever taken a brief from someone that says I would just want them to do what I tell them to do, but that might be different, where you guys are. But
no comment on the Canadian market at all.
No, but I don't know, Julie, what do you think?
No, it's not everybody for sure, but sorry.
No, I think it depends on the market. I think it depends on the market and what you're trying to recruit for. But No, I think most. No, I think what you said, Joan. I think most people are looking for people who can add something and add some value rather than just tick a bunch of boxes and then we're done and move on. But I mean, it might be an awful thing to say, but perhaps in the less skilled or the non-skilled areas, then it's perhaps more of a box ticking exercise that could be done or automated in a more efficient way to save cost.
Yeah.
That's all. I think that in most situations, people want to consult. In fact, I put not that I'm trying to promote it, but I put a post on LinkedIn today. It's like, I think that, we, on this exact topic, I think we talk about, you've got to adapt to the market, else you're going to be dead or like on the shelf in a short period of time because of technology and how it's evolved and evolving. But I don't know that is the case. I think that the core things that we do and the core things that we have to do, we already adapted to. And just going back to your point earlier, I think that with the, in the old days, let's call it, or when we first started doing this, the barrier, and still the barrier, there is no real barrier to entry to start a recruitment agency. You can start it in your basement. Plenty of people did and have, and probably might even still be there. The costs of starting this type of organisation are low, and you can keep them pretty low. So I think in the older days, when the staffing folks used to have a poorer reputation, was where you might try and take advantage of that, right? Where you would cut corners, you would have slapdash, perhaps unethical type of behaviours, which maybe things weren't kept confidentially or whatever it was, right? So it was perhaps an easy moneymaker, because you could make a fair amount of money by doing things in a easy breezy slapdash type of way. But I think that that's changed, and I think that that is partly changed by how we care for the people in our industry. Certainly when we started, we weren't particularly well cared for, and that's no offense to the people that we have to work for, but I think the value of a recruiter has gone up considerably, and I don't mean how much they're paid, but the value to the employers of recruiters, now is high. Whereas we're taken care of. Organisations try and retain and have strategies to retain. They give bells and whistles and things to people to try and make their day more exciting or fun, or to relieve the pressure, or have a yoga room or a stress relief room or a ping pong table, which is also going back a few years. But there's a lot more thought around how we can make this environment that we're in, which can be very stressful, more fun, to encourage folks to stay and to also make them be less likely to leave. And to be honest, it's selfish, because if they're productive, the last thing that they want to do is for someone to walk out the door with a bag of a bag of customers that they'll just take to the next organisation. So it is contrived for sure, but I think with good results.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. The UK is awesome. Jenny is awesome. We've solved it all. Those are the differences. Canada and the US are awesome too. But thank you so much, Jenny. It was great to have you featured here and have a bit of a chat about your history and also, rec to rec and the UK market. And just a little teaser out there for anybody who's listening on this. Julie and Jenny and I talked about even maybe doing perhaps somewhat regularly a UK panel as well, so we can have a chat about the UK perspective on recruitment and on the industry, and either domestic or, what did you say before, Julie? UK away people? What did you refer to yourself as?
I'm not sure.
With a good snappy phrase.
Yeah, expat, but I think that there's the voice is very relevant and at the heart, close to the heart of a lot of where this has all come from. So I think it's good to have local perspective.
100%. Well, thank you both, and hope to see you all next Wednesday.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Rick. Thanks, Julie. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.